Whenever you're hearing about the inhabitants of America, you may have heard the term Red Indian. But we know copper isn't red, and the Aboriginals of America were described as copper colored, which is brown. I will be going over who the Red Indian is and why they were even being called red to begin with. We starting off with this article from Marquette University Law School faculty blog. Why is the word red skin so offensive? The historical record, in fact, shows that before the 20th century, Native Americans frequently used the adjective red in reference to themselves, and that the term redskin may have originated as a literal translation of a Native American term used to differentiate Indians from other Americans. Now ask yourself, does it make sense to call themselves Red Indians to differentiate themselves from Americans, as if Americans called themselves Indians? You will only have to make that differentiation if there were other Indians. Just like when talking about apples, let's say green apples, you have to be specific and say green apples because apples are generally red. Now, before I move on, keep in mind that in the 1828 dictionary, the Aboriginals of America were described as copper colored, not red. It says, for example, the 1952, long after 1828, edition of the Universal Dictionary of the English Language described redskin as a Native American Indian, a red man, but makes no reference to the word being offensive. Now ask yourself, when being described, how did Indians go from being brown or copper colored to red? And as I move on, take note that during the colonization era, poor white people or white slaves were being referred to as red leg. And they were being called that because when they were in the sun, they were being burned by it, and their white skin would turn red in it. Now, keep this in mind as I move forward. We looking into a report to the Secretary of War of the United States on Indian Affairs, and this is dated to 1822. It says more than half the Cherokee Nation, a large part of the Choctaws and Chickasaws, and I may add indeed of all other tribes with whom the whites have had intercourse, are of mixed blood. The offspring of this intercourse, a numerous body, are of promising talents and appearance. Now, what's so promising about their appearance? Their complexion is nearly that of the white population. Remember, the 1828 definition for American said American was originally applied to the Aboriginals of America, and now it's being applied to the descendants of Europeans being born in America. These are those descendants. Both white people and red Indians were both called red. And you can only assume the red Indians were only being called red because of what happened to their skin in the sun. And now we're going to look into this to see why the red Indians had to differentiate themselves from anyone. A general description of the Indian tells us that the Aboriginal of America is tall, straight of stature, and muscular, having coarse black hair, well-formed limbs, deep chest, brown or copper colored complexion, head a little flat, prominent nose, compressed lips, dark eyes, and possessed of a great power of endurance. You see, they called them brown or copper colored, not red at all. In regard to the complexion of the American Indian, Father Charvelot says, the color of the savages does not prove a third species between the white and the black, as some people have imagined. They are very swarthy and of a dirty, dark red, which appears more in Florida, of which Louisiana is a part. But this is not their natural complexion. The frequent frictions they use gives them this red, and it is surprising that they are not blacker, not redder, but blacker. And the whole point of this video was to show you that the red Indians are Europeans, just as the 1828 definition for American said. Remember, the term American was originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored Americans, but now being applied to the descendants of Europeans. Then there's groups like the Improved Order of the Red Men or the Native American Party. And believe it or not, these two groups had nothing to do with so-called American Indians or Native Americans. They were all revolving around the so-called white man.